Yeah, so my name's Matt Erickson. I'm a townie, so I'm born and raised Bloomington Normal. And yeah, I started knowing the the name Harold Gregor, or first actually seeing his paintings before I really saw the name or knew the individual. When I was around 14, 15, so 1984, 85, 86, I would wander around ISU's buildings, of course the art building, um, and all around campus. So I would basically do that just to see artwork, just to educate myself on the artwork that was happening at the college. I would also sneak into the painting rooms at night, pull people's paintings out and check them out. Basically, yeah, investigating, seeing what everybody was doing, if it's inspiration-wise and whatnot. Um, and then, after a couple of years, I started really like seeing names and whatnot. So Harold Gregor, Harold Boyd, and Ken Holder, of course. And then around probably more of my high school years, I would then see this guy out downtown, out in the sun, leaning his paintings against a car or a helper and photographing them in the sun. And being young and seeing that he was an older artist, I didn't really, didn't make any conversation back then. But then as I started getting into my, let's see, probably early 20s, I'd see him out and, just kind of stop and chat, ask questions, not really talking or having too much of a conversation, but just kind of, I guess, being nosy as a young artist. Well, again, I guess starting then into my sort of mid-20s, I had my first real artist studio, out of the house, out of the basement, out of the bedroom, in a building with a bunch of ISU alumni, and also including Harold Boyd. So Harold Boyd was the first one of the three amigos that I got to start talking to and, go into their studio, have some little chats and stuff, and just, admiring all those people in this building on Monroe Street, 115 East Monroe. So people like Michael Dabina, James Heil, that will be in this show, Mark Forth, and being the young, sort of nobody artist in the building, I really took it seriously whenever I'd get to stop and talk to these guys, because I just wanted to know, everything I could possibly learn from them. And then, really, after I didn't really get to do too much talking with Harold until I started in the early mid 2000s. I started putting on art shows for other people, and that's when I started getting kind of more known by the artists downtown. So I was putting their work in the show, and I was putting up work for a lot of the college students, so ISU and Wesleyan, and then eventually Heartland. And then, earning that trust of putting people like Dabina's and Boyd's artwork in shows. And then talking a little bit more with Harold and Marlene at the gallery, popping in again, trying to learn, anything I could learn from them on how to handle things, how to show things, all that kind of stuff. And then probably I bought a building in 2011 called Come Together Space. And kind of a couple of years after that is when Harold Boyd really introduced me to Ken Holder, who I started doing shows with and helping out. And again, sort of really first starting to gain these people as I would call friends, and not just being sort of the young artist around. But and then certainly talking with Harold Gregor a bit more. And then shortly after Gregor passed away, I just started, a couple years before that, started handling artist estates for the families once they pass away. So then Marlene hired me on to as I would call it, sort of excavate Harold Gregor's studio, which the one on Main Street, which they, moved into in the mid-'80s. So, I mean, you're talking, almost 40 years worth of an artist's, historical records. And the guy kept, I'd swear, every single piece of paper, every correspondent. And it was really just a treasure trove. I found things that I dreamed about finding as a teenager. I found 5 or 6 Ed Roche first edition photo books, books that changed photo book history, things that I'd seen in museums behind glass and now I was holding in my hands, and several Harry Hu exhibition catalogs, which are full comic books. You see them in a magazine and you see maybe 1 or 2 pages, but here they are in this guy's studio, just smashed between 1,000 other pamphlets and show cards for decades and decades. A lot of local people, of course, and seeing pictures of Harold with. They went to an exhibition and a photograph with him and Hockney. Finding a Robert Longo book with a Polaroid of Harold and Robert Longo, whose work I had really loved. Finding John Baldessari's home phone number in Harold's Rolodex. And I'd actually made a note to call the number, and then unfortunately, John passed away also. So I didn't get to chat with him. But one of the funnest things I found, or funnest eras, I would say, was Harold's several years in doing a lot of conceptual art. So in 1966, he had seen a photograph of Carl Andre's work, and Harold was at Chapman College out in California, and he immediately put on a show with students and faculty of this full conceptual art show, which he showed over Christmas break on purpose so that nobody could see the show, which is the kind of rebellion in art that I've always been drawn to. Most of my favorite work in art history is outsider artists, and then the people who rebel and the pranksters and those kind of things. And it was just really exciting to see all these things that he was doing. I found black and white photographs from 66, 67, where he's signing his name to the grass, like just a big open pasture. He's signing the road. He's signing a giant, 8-foot excavation tire. Doing all these wild things that was super exciting, and I really, really wished I would have known about, when I was younger and he was still here, because I would have just talked for hours and hours about those California years, and also into the early 70s here in Illinois. He was still doing some conceptual stuff. I even found some paperwork where Harold tried to bring Alan Kaprow to ISU, and it didn't happen, unfortunately. But there's a layout of a piece that he would have done here in ISU, which really would have been amazing. And then Marlene also had me clean out and excavate their home on Market Street. And in the early stages of doing that, I kind of started with this little attic that was in the building. And along with all the usual, life history stuff, was a medium-sized wooden box labeled drawings. And, asked Marlene about it. I had left it up there for a little bit. She had no clue what it was. So one day I bring it down, pop it open, and there's over 300 drawings with pencil, charcoal, acrylic ink, paints, and ink, and of all from the 60s, so 1962, 68 or 69. And they just thrilled me. I just loved them immediately. It's, again, that exciting work that I had no idea about. but they also immediately reminded me of his vibroscapes, the color combinations, the brightness, the excitement, the life that was in these drawings was just really exciting. And you could see this connection over, 60 years from the same person. And really anybody who's known Harold just from the Illinois years would have no idea about this figural work that he did, because it was all figural and abstracted landscapes. And through that sort of 10 years, you could sort of see, I believe he was probably in his 30s, early 30s when he was doing that. It's kind of that male artist getting the Picasso influence flushed out of his system, while simultaneously finding his own vision, his own way of mark making and all that. And because soon after Marlene hired me, I wanted to right away kind of admit to her my feelings of Harold Gregor's work, and of course it's changed over the course of my 30-some years of knowing his work and then eventually him. But being a teenager in the cornfields of Illinois, I absolutely hated cornfield paintings. I could not stand them. It was everything that I didn't want to know about art. But also, being in the 80s, I was reading about the New York art scene, every day. So that was the stuff that was thrilling me, all these things. And then the art history, of course, with the rebels and the conceptual stuff and all those kind of things. So, but then of course into my later teens, when I started getting serious about painting, realizing the exquisiteness of his work. So learning that you could I'll simultaneously hate a work of art, maybe because of what it is or what it represents, but also admire the skill that it took, and loving that part of it, and seeing the professionalism of it also was really fantastic. And then of course into my 20s and whatnot, really like picking out specific works that I would actually really like and would be drawn to. And then when I kind of the mid 2000s, seeing like the vibroscapes and that sort of work, really, I really enjoyed that, and kind of felt it seemed to me that he was having sort of more fun with the work. It seemed more livelier and more fun. Yeah, that's kind of the main aspects for that, I guess. Yeah.